Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. One of the words that I'm seeing more and more in modern culture is the word curate. That means to carefully select. Now, if you're a curator at an art museum, you're carefully selecting pieces of art that would go into your museum. They fit the vibe for your museum. And one of the reasons we're seeing that term so much is there's so much competition for our attention, for our money, for our time, by all the technology and by all the apps. And so we're having to be very careful about what we choose. And the same thing applies to fragrances, because just the sheer volume of fragrances at the moment is insane. I mean, it seems like, especially early in the year, there's a new fragrance like every day almost. And so you've got to be really careful not to just grab the latest fragrance and hope it's good, because there are a ton of all-time classics out there that have proven to be good over time. And most of the new flankers coming out, I would say 90% of them you won't even hear about in 3 years' time. So I have 8 fragrances today that are carefully curated. They're high quality. They're tasteful fragrances that will stand the test of time. Let's get to it. Fragrance number 1 is Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Mâle Le Parfum. And if you're looking for a Jean-Paul Gaultier fragrance and you're over the age of 30, this is the one to get, because while the elixir is very popular, it's primarily popular with men in their 20s because young women like really, really sweet fragrances. And even though this is sweet, this has been toned down. It is made more sensual and more mature with the use of iris and cardamom that tones down the vanilla sweetness. There is some sweetness here, but it's done in a better way overall. You're not going to be bombarded with sweetness. And this is a fragrance that Quentin Bisch, who's really thought to be the #1 perfumer in the world at the moment, fought extremely hard to work on, coming off the success of Dalina by Parfum de Marly, which was iconic, and then Ganymede by Marc-Antoine Barrois, which was the niche fragrance of the year in 2019. So when Jean-Paul Gaultier hired him for this, he was ready. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to be the follow-up to Francis Kurkdjian, who had created the original Le Mâle, and he really went to town on this and toned down what had originally been a super sweet line, and he made it a little bit more mature. That's why you've got the guy in the tuxedo instead of just a navy suit. Most fragrance encyclopedias show that Natalie Gracia Chetto to be the main perfumer for this. However, she was used to working with Tom Ford. She was an experienced perfumer, been around a long time. She was brought in to provide a little bit of polish. She made sure that Bisch, who is renowned, he works for Givaudan, and they have captured exclusive access to the Akagali wood molecule. She made sure that no, he did not add Akagali wood to this. It wasn't needed. And she just kind of polished up things a little bit. Fundamentally, this is a Bisch fragrance. This is too, but this was created for a different demographic. But when you're looking for something that's iconic, that's always going to last and be important, you're looking for the elite in perfumery. You're looking for Quentin Bisch. And if you're over 30, you're looking for this. I've said in the past, if you're looking for a top quality fragrance, try and find something that is being released for an anniversary of an iconic fragrance. And Le Sel d'Issy from Issey Miyake is an anniversary fragrance, but on steroids. Because even though this was the 30th anniversary of L'Eau d'Issy pour Homme that this came out, Issey Miyake had liver cancer, and it was very clear that this was going to be the last fragrance that he had any influence on. And so it just absolutely had to work for Issey Miyake, and they pulled out all the stops. So firstly, it's a salt-based fragrance, mainly because in Japan, in the Shinto religion, salt is sacred. It's purifying. And if you are very, very sick, as Issey Miyake was, you want to be thinking about something spiritual, and Japan, salt is very spiritual. That was chosen by Issey Miyake himself. And then, of course, what are you going to do? You have to hit it out of the park. You're going to bring in Quentin Bisch. They brought him in here, and he created a salt accord. Salt actually has no smell, but what Bisch wanted to do was to create the feeling of the salt meeting the earth, like on a beach kind of thing. They also added laminaria seaweed, and I couldn't believe this, but apparently they grew the vetiver in sand so that the vetiver itself would have a mineralic feel to it. They wanted this fragrance to succeed so much. Now, the one thing that's always puzzled me, I was like, Why is there oak moss in what is fundamentally a fresh sea-based fragrance? That just totally puzzled me. And then apparently oak moss evolved from the ocean, so it's got a little bit of an iodine feel to it. So it's got an earthiness, but it's also got a connection to the ocean with the iodine feel. Now, this is supposedly 95% natural ingredients, but this is the most aggressively fresh, I'm not just going to say designer fragrance, just fragrance that I've ever tried. I find that hard to believe. There's got to be a lot more aroma chemicals in this, but yeah, that's what I read. 95% of this is supposed to be completely natural ingredients, but this is going to be around forever. This is an all-time classic. For fragrance number 3, it wasn't so much the specific fragrance that had to be a success. It was more the line. This is the original Givenchy, gentlemen, that came out in the mid-70s, and this was a success, but for over 40 years, Givenchy struggled to repeat that. But then in 2017, they hired 2 of the best perfumers, Nathalie Lorson and Olivier Cresp. They absolutely had to hit it out of the park with the line, and they did. Now, how hard is it to be a master perfumer? Well, first off, there are like 5 times more astronauts on Earth than there are master perfumers. It took Nathalie Lorson 36 years in the industry before she was designated master perfumer. So when you've got 2 of them working on your line, that is a major commitment, and it did work. And Givenchy Gentleman Reserve Privee is the pinnacle of that line. This is not a perfect fragrance, mainly because I'm not so happy about Olivier Cresp being the first person to create the modern gourmand. He actually did that in the late 90s with Mugler's Angel, but I'm just kind of joking. This really is the pinnacle of the line, and even though it's got gourmandy facets, it's much more than that. The brief for this fragrance was meant to be Durham Intense, but with an edge. What they decided was to do it with whiskey. That was going to give it the edge. But they didn't even mess around with the whiskey. They hired the best perfumers, but they hired a distiller, a master distiller from Scotland, who brought over Scottish barley that they used to make whiskey Absolu for this. Designer fragrances almost always use whiskey accord. It's created in the lab. They don't use the natural ingredients because it's so expensive. Never mind going out and hiring a master distiller, but they were throwing everything that they could at this fragrance, and the combination of whiskey, iris, amber, and chestnut really worked. The performance is good. Everybody that I know knows that this is the fragrance to get if you're thinking of buying a modern Givenchy fragrance. Fragrance number 4 is yet another Quentin Bisch creation, and when you are looking for a fragrance that's tasteful and a classic, you want to go with the best. You want to go with the best perfumer at the moment, and that is Quentin Bisch, and he created Jean-Paul Gaultier Le Beau Le Parfum, generally thought to be the number 1 Le Beau in the line, and this, I believe, is the first one that he created on his own. Sonia Constant, who works with Tom Ford, she was on the original Le Beau, but she dropped off for this one. Generally, that's a sign of confidence. They're giving the perfumer the full confidence to go in his own direction emotionally, and he really did, and he did hit this out of the park. So why is Bisch such a big deal in perfumery? Well, he's got a strange backstory. He has no chemistry background. He still applied to Givaudan when he was younger, but they said no. So for 5 years, he went and became a theater director, eventually realized that his nose was his greatest gift. And apparently he has an otherworldly nose. So he didn't want to waste it. He went and bought a place in Grasse, worked with Michel Almirac, who did Fahrenheit, and eventually worked his way into Robertet. And he worked with somebody there who was his mentor. Her name was Michelle Amarito, and she knew how good he was to such a crazy degree that when he created a specific formula for reminiscence essence, and basically what happens is the perfumer creates a formula and they apply to the house for that particular formula to be the fragrance, and they get a number of different applications. But because Bisch was an unknown, Amarito, who had nothing to do with creating the fragrance, put her name on it. They went for it, but it was a Bisch creation, and that was his breakthrough fragrance, Reminiscence Essence, and it made a name for him. Now, honestly though, this fragrance really is the best in the Beau line. I struggle with it because it is so sweet and difficult to wear in warm weather, and that's the kind of fragrance that's tropical. It's got pineapple, it's got coconut, it's got a lot of tonka, it's got some woods in it. So yeah, it's definitely got a tropical feel, but because it's so sweet, I struggle with it. But in terms of overall scent, this thing is fantastic, and it's got superb performance. Fragrance number 5 is one that I think is super underrated. This is Original Santal by Creed. And there's a reason this is underrated. It's because the formula for this was taken from a designer fragrance from a fairly inexpensive house, which is Montblanc. This is Montblanc Individuel. And this came out first, and then Creed applied the DNA, the rough workings of this, and made it into a sophisticated niche scent. The problem that I have with comparing the two is that this is vastly better than Montblanc Individuel. I like Individuel, but this thing I think is a masterpiece, but because you're constantly comparing it to a designer fragrance, it gets overlooked. Here's the thing though, this supposedly smells, according to Jeremy Fragrance, a lot of people really, it's like dryer sheets, raspberry dryer sheets. This does not. This is a woody aromatic with an oriental vibe to it. It's not the first thing I think of when I smell it is sweetness. There's a sweetness there, but it's far more subtle. This doesn't have vanilla. This is, like I said, it's a woody aromatic. At the end of the day, this is more of a sandalwood fragrance. So there's a lot of sandalwood here. There's also lavender and juniper that give it an aromatic feel. There's coriander and ginger that gives it a spicy feel. And yes, there is tonka here, but it's a subtle tonka. This is a gentleman's fragrance. Fragrance number 6 is Burberry Brit. I haven't talked about this fragrance for over 2 years, and yet this is my favorite Burberry fragrance. I've tried 2 in the Hero line. I have all of the older Burberry fragrances. I absolutely love this. The only real flaw here is the fact that it's got 4 hours performance, but it's such a classy, gentlemanly scent. It's a rose-based fragrance, so you get the powderiness of the rose, but you get a spicy component with cardamom. You also get some ginger as well. You have that powdery element. This is a fragrance that once I almost, and I'm not joking, it was 3 in the morning, I almost bought a 200 milliliter bottle of this. Thank God I didn't, because I have so many fragrances, but that's how much I like it. If you like rose fragrances for men, and the cardamom here makes it definitely more masculine and more approachable than a lot of other rose fragrances, this one really works. It's a hidden gem. Most people think of either Touch or London. This one fits my aesthetic. To me, this is more gentlemanly. To me, London is more, holiday, sweet. And then Touch is clean office. But this one's got a sophisticated element that I really like. The performance, yes, it's not ideal, and it is somewhat synthetic, given the fact that it's a very inexpensive fragrance. But all in all, the scent itself is really hard to beat. I'm always surprised in my polls just how well Absolu Aventus does, and yet I don't find that Club de Nuit Precieux 1 does all that well at all. I don't really understand why, perhaps because it is an Armaf and Creed is a high-end brand. I have compared this, and this is not bad at all. It's obviously not the same. It's not quite as succinct with the notes, but this is a really good fragrance. I get solid performance. It's fairly simple in what it is that it's a fresh Aventus style fragrance, but there's a sweetness and a spiciness that Aventus doesn't have. In this particular case, they use a lot of caramel. There's also pink pepper, black pepper, and coriander to go with the pineapple and the bergamot in the open. But yeah, this is a solid fragrance. And one thing I really like about this is, yes, I do find this little thing annoying, but the presentation overall is pretty good, and the performance is pretty good too. I've never understood how the original can be so popular and yet a really solid clone can't be. And so if you're looking for a good clone of Absolu Aventus, I highly recommend this. And sometimes in lists like this, clones can get overlooked, but this is a good one. Finally, we have a very simple, inexpensive fragrance that really works for a gentleman. This is Rochas L'Homme. This is a mildly sweet fougere. So this has blood orange and pineapple. So it's got a fruity component. It's got 4 aromatic notes, including basil and oak moss, and then it's got some tonka. So it's one of those fougères that's got a little bit of everything going on. The performance here is not bad. It's not exceptional. It's about 4 to 5 hours. Solid projection, but a very gentlemanly scent. And you're always looking for fougères that are a little bit different. This is a sweeter fougère than you would normally get. And I just think it's slept on. It's a really good price fragrance, and I do find it gentlemanly. Anyway, I hope you guys like this. This notion of curation, I think, is really important, especially if you're into fragrances. Find a way to not spend too much money, to not buy impulsively. I put in checks and balances all the time. Haven't bought any fragrances for a couple of months. I've started trading them. It can get, in this modern world, I mean, you're just getting attacked from everywhere. I'm getting spam phone calls all the time. Got all these distractions trying to take my time away. It's just driving me nuts, and I'm not surprised that the word curate has become more popular. I am seeing it out there. It's a word that I never use, but I'm seeing it so much online now by people, you know, in academia, smart people that are like, hey, you know, I need to take care of my own attention. And fragrances, man, it's as bad as anything as far as, you know, trying to capture your attention. Thanks for watching, guys. Take it easy.